It began in the brittle silence of a 1994 autumn evening. Ridgeway Park, nestled in the thick pine woods near the Oregon coast, was almost forgotten by that time. Once a lively campsite and hiking retreat for families from Astoria and the surrounding logging towns, it had slowly been abandoned after the fire of '82. Nobody talked much about that fire anymore. They'd rebuilt what they could in the nearby town, and the tragedy had long since faded into rumor and backwoods legend. But the park, Ridgeway, was never reopened. No official decree. No fences or warning signs. Just silence, and the kind that settled so deep it crawled into the bones of the place. In its vacancy, the wind learned to speak, and the trees began to listen. Or so the old-timers claimed. No one lived near Ridgeway anymore, just a scattering of broken cabins, rusted swing sets overtaken by ivy, and a trail that led to a pond that hadn't reflected the sky since 1982. People went missing sometimes. Hikers, campers, drifters. Usually the search parties found boot prints that vanished mid-trail, or tents left behind as if someone had unzipped reality and stepped out. Dogs returned without their owners. And sometimes, just sometimes, those who came back did so wrong, silent, wide-eyed, unwilling to speak of what they'd heard whispering from the tree line. Deputy Mae Jensen had heard the stories. She was young, in her late 20s and new to the coast, transferred from Salem after what she referred to vaguely as a complicated year. Her face was plain but intelligent, eyes sharp, posture rigid, trained and stubborn. Ridgeway was her patrol zone now, technically marked as protected forest land, off limits to the public, but that didn't stop teenagers from sneaking in, or hermits from wandering its perimeter. Her first week on duty, she found a circle of melted candles arranged on the basketball court. In the center, a child's shoe dangled from the hoop net. Just one, a small red Converse, worn at the toe. It hadn't been thrown, no scuff marks or signs of a toss. It had been placed. The morning had been cold, the kind of dry, sharp cold that came just before the first frost. Still, she'd felt sweat beat on her neck as she stepped onto that cracked court, each of her footsteps echoing louder than they should have. The sound bounced off the trees wrong, too long, too flat. The locals didn't go there. The people who still remembered the fire, those in their 60s and older, spoke of something that came down from the mountain during the blaze and never left. Something ancient. Something that fed on silence and liked to mimic the voice of a friend. Mae wasn't superstitious. She believed in footprints, in DNA swabs, in autopsy reports and jurisdictional maps. But the deeper she drove into Ridgeway Park, the more she felt the rules bending around her. Like the forest obeyed a different kind of law, a more ancient one. Her patrol car's dash cam glitched every time she neared the park entrance. Not once. Every time. Static, then black. When she reversed back to the county roads, the camera returned to normal. Her two-way radio worked fine until she crossed the second wooden bridge, the one that curved like a horseshoe and had the faded, nearly rotted plaque bolted to its side. Carved into the weather-worn rail were the words, "Stay past dusk, and you stay forever." At first, Mae thought it was a prank. Some old urban legend, maybe etched by a group of college kids on a ghost hunting trip. But it was too deliberate, too neat. Someone had carved it in all capitals, each letter identical in size and depth. It didn't look hand-done. It looked stamped, perfect, and old. Weather-worn, but untouched by graffiti or decay. Mae had taken a picture with her phone and uploaded it to her cloud for safety. That night, when she tried to show it to the sheriff, the photo was gone. Not corrupted, not blurry. Gone. Not even listed in her camera roll history. As if it had never existed. When she checked the cloud, the folder containing it had been deleted, along with nothing else. That night she dreamt of the bridge. Only it wasn't old in the dream. It was pristine, fresh timber, no moss, sun gleaming off polished bolts. She stood in the middle, and the forest behind her was silent. In front of her, beneath the bridge, something moved in the water. It didn't swim. It breathed. She could feel it in her chest, each inhale vibrating the planks beneath her feet. Then she heard it call her name, not in her voice, not in a stranger's, but in her mother's, who had been dead for 8 years. She woke up gasping. Pine needles were stuck to her sheets, not on the floor, not outside, on her bed, embedded in the cotton like they'd grown there. By the 3rd week, May had stopped sleeping through the night. She told herself it was work stress. She told herself a lot of things, but she couldn't ignore the signs. The whispering had followed her home. It began as wind outside her window, though there was no breeze. Then it was voices just behind her when she brushed her teeth, too soft to understand, but undeniably human. Then came her name, spoken in a cadence not used anymore. A dialect older than the state, older than the trees. Ridgeway wasn't abandoned. Something still lived there. Something that never left after the fire. And Deputy May Jensen, rigid, logical, unshakable, had just been invited inside. The days grew shorter, and the sky above Ridgeway dulled into a lifeless gray that never shifted. It wasn't the soft kind of gray that suggested a coming storm or the soothing hush of snow. No, this was the kind of sky that felt hollow, as if something had scooped the soul out of the heavens and left only a cold waiting shell. May began logging more solo patrols than usual, brushing off the concerned looks from her colleagues and the casual check-ins from dispatch. She insisted, rather too quickly, that she liked the quiet, though the truth dug at her ribs with every step. Ridgeway was calling her back, not in words, not in anything so clear, but in the pulsing, visceral sense of incompletion. It was unfinished business. It was like an itch behind the eye, a whisper you almost hear but can't quite make out. She began seeing things again, and this time they didn't vanish quite so easily. A man in a ranger's uniform, burnt at the edges, his silhouette half lost in smoke, just standing among the trees at a distance. No face, just darkness beneath the brim of a melted hat. A child running between trees, always running. But when she turned her head fully, there was nothing but undergrowth and silence. And then there was cabin number 4. It had been condemned for years, gutted by fire, left to rot. But one morning, as she passed by it on foot, she swore she saw a pale, round face watching her from what should have been the window. But that cabin had no floor, only a burned-out hole filled with moss-covered beams and the stench of wet ash. May told herself it was fatigue. That stress did strange things, that memories played tricks, but her dreams betrayed her more cruelly each night. The whispering was now a choir, layered voices, some shrieking and some singing lullabies, all swirling around her bed like a swarm of invisible insects. She started writing them down in a notebook she kept hidden under her mattress. Single lines, phrases. Do not turn your back on the stone. She still walks without eyes. They buried it wrong. One morning, she found scratches on her patrol vehicle, not the kind of vandalism you'd expect from a bored teenager with a pocket knife. These were long, purposeful scratches across the hood, 3 parallel lines that sank into the paint and carved into the steel beneath. They weren't there the night before. She reviewed her dashcam footage. Nothing. Just static for a 10-minute span around 3:12 a.m. The exact time she awoke in bed with the sense that something had just left her room. She took samples from the scratches and sent them to the state lab in Portland. A week later, the results came back with a short, typed note. Inconclusive, mineral-based, not from any recognized tool or animal. May stared at the paper for over an hour, rereading that sentence. Mineral-based. Like rock, like stone, the kind of stone buried beneath Ridgeway. She didn't sleep that night. Not at all. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table with the lights off, the notebook of whispers open in front of her. Her coffee went cold. Her gun was within reach. And in the silence, deep, velvet, unnatural silence, she heard breathing from her closet. Slow, rhythmic, wet. She didn't open the door. She didn't move until dawn. And when she finally found the courage to glance at the closet, The door was cracked 2 inches wider than she remembered. May's hand trembled as she reached for the knob the next morning, steeling herself beneath the fragile glow of daylight. The closet door now hung fully ajar. Inside, everything looked normal. Too normal. Her uniform jackets, boots, cleaning supplies, nothing seemed disturbed, but there was a wrongness she couldn't name. The air was colder. The shadows too deep. The floor of the closet, previously wood, now had a black smear across it, like soot or ash. She crouched and touched it. It stuck to her fingers like damp coal and smelled of something she could only describe as old blood and cedar smoke. Her gut churned. She washed her hands 3 times. The smell didn't leave. That day at the sheriff's office, May sat through a morning briefing like a ghost. The others barely noticed her silence. Ridgeway wasn't something people talked about anymore. A few locals brought it up occasionally, spinning tales of haunted woods to entertain kids or tourists, but to the department it was a closed chapter. Lost hikers, a cabin fire, no evidence, no reason to go digging. But May was already waist-deep in the mud. She spent her lunch break in the records room. It took hours, but finally she found them. Boxes of old reports sealed and nearly forgotten. One was labeled, Incident Archive, Ridgeway, 1989-1994. Inside, photos warped from time, handwritten notes on yellowing paper, strange diagrams. She recognized a name, Deputy Clark. He had vanished in 1992 during a solo patrol through Ridgeway. Only his radio was found, burnt and buried in mud, still crackling faint static. There were others. A girl who went missing during a summer camping trip in 1990. Her little red shoes were discovered years later, placed neatly on the roof of cabin number 4. An old man who had lived near the park boundary reported chanting underground in the spring of 1991. His report was dismissed as dementia-related. He died a week later from a fall down his basement stairs. But May noted something. The coroner wrote, "Stone dust in lungs." Stone dust. That phrase clanged in her head like a warning bell. Again and again it showed up, in side notes, pathology reports, margin scribbles. The whispers in her journal seemed to be repeating themselves through time. The stone knows your name. They took its eyes and now it sees through yours. May returned home that evening with her arms full of copied documents and a gnawing fear she couldn't name. She hadn't eaten all day, her coffee tasted like dirt, and when she looked in the mirror her pupils were dilated beyond normal. That night, the dream returned, but this time she was underground. The walls were made of roots and bones. There were voices singing in reverse, and in the center of the chamber was the stone. Large, cracked, pulsing, breathing. Something old and angry coiled around it, without form, without eyes. Yet it saw her. When she woke, her mouth was full of soil. Not metaphorically. Actual damp earth. Her bed was streaked with dirt, her feet covered in scratches like she'd run barefoot through brambles. She checked her phone. 3:12 a.m., the same time. Always. She turned on every light in the house and stared out the window into the woods behind her property. For a moment, the darkness looked back. Not metaphorically. She felt it. A presence. A gaze. Not something hiding in the trees, but the trees themselves. Watching. Then, just before the first bird called to the dawn, her phone buzzed. One new voicemail. She hadn't heard it ring. She listened. Only static. And beneath the static, barely audible, a whisper. "We remember what you buried." May dropped the phone. It cracked. And for the first time, she truly wept. The old woman May met by the river had no name she would offer. Just a long, cracked gaze that seemed to peel back May's layers like bark. Her clothes looked sewn from quilts too old to name. When May asked her how long she'd lived out here, the woman only chuckled. A low, graveled sound like gravel spilling into a dry well, and said, "I was here before Ridgeway was Ridgeway." May asked if she knew anything about the disappearances, The woman shook her head slowly. "Don't go asking about what the trees have taken, that's theirs now." That night, May dreamed of the river. It was frozen, but something under the ice was trying to surface. Not with violence, with patience, with intention. A figure pressed a face against the glassy sheet and smiled. She woke at 3:33 a.m. again. When she looked out her window, her patrol truck was running. The engine turned over once, sputtered, then died. Keys still on the nightstand. The next morning, her tires had mud on them. But she hadn't driven anywhere. May began reviewing every report from the last 50 years. She stayed late in the sheriff's archives, dust coating her sleeves. There were too many missing people. Too many disappearances categorized as accidental with no evidence. A cluster in 1968, another in 77, a sharp rise in 86. And each time, the reports mentioned strange weather patterns, dips in temperature, early frosts, electrical malfunctions. And in the margins of a 1977 report, someone had written, in faded red ink, "Don't follow the voice." May felt her breath slow, because for the past 2 nights, she had started hearing her mother's voice calling her name through the trees. Her mother had died 10 years ago. That evening, she drove to cabin No. 4, flashlight in hand, determined to face whatever memory or madness had claimed the place. The foundation creaked as she stepped into the ruins. Her light caught something, etched symbols on the interior beams. Old, weather-worn, not graffiti, runes. She took a picture. The flash flickered, and in that single burst of light, she saw a man crouched in the far corner, his mouth open, eyes vacant, skin waxy and gray-blue like something dredged from a lake. Then he was gone. She didn't scream. She couldn't. Her phone refused to turn on. She walked back to the car without looking back, every footstep echoing with the weight of being watched. Back in town, she tried to tell the sheriff, but the words felt too brittle. She played the voicemail again, hoping to find evidence. The sound was gone, replaced with static and a faint rhythmic tapping. It sounded like fingers drumming on wood. She isolated the audio. The tapping wasn't random. It was Morse code. 3 words. "Stay outside tonight." And that's what May did. She didn't sleep. She didn't dream. But outside her cabin in the deep violet fog just before dawn, something large moved through the trees without sound. The birds did not return at sunrise. The storm came 3 days early. May had been staring out the foggy glass of her station window when the sky collapsed. Not with thunder or warning, but with the sudden violence of something ancient clawing through the clouds. The power flickered, then died. Rain began to fall, not in drops, but in long, heavy ropes that slapped the earth with unnatural weight. She grabbed her flashlight and radio and stepped outside. Ridgeway Park wasn't supposed to see this kind of weather until mid-October. This was July. But the calendar hadn't mattered in months. The trees bent as if bowing to something in the sky. That was May's first thought. Not the wind, but obedience. Reverence. Something above them had returned. As she reached her patrol truck, a static hiss broke through her radio, not from dispatch, but a frequency she hadn't tuned. It wasn't language. Not exactly. Clicking. Tapping. A wet, dragging sound that ended in a low, guttural hum. She froze. Then the voice returned. Not from the radio, but from somewhere just behind her left shoulder, close enough she could feel the breath. She's watching now. May turned. Nothing. She stood in the center of the dirt lot, surrounded by rain and swaying pine. But there was no one there. She climbed into the truck and drove toward cabin number 7, the cabin where the last visitor had vanished in April, the cabin they'd closed off, the cabin that never stayed boarded for long. It was open again. The door swung lazily in the storm wind, the chain lock dangling like a snapped bone. May gritted her teeth and stepped out, flashlight cutting through the gray. Inside, the smell hit her first. Earth, mildew, something else. Not rot, not exactly, but wrong. She swept the light across the walls. Nothing. Then the floor creaked. She wasn't moving. Another creak from the bedroom. She raised her radio. Static. "Dispatch, this is Officer May Holloway. I'm at cabin 7. Possible trespasser. Please advise." No reply. She edged forward. 1 step. 2. The door to the bedroom was cracked open, just enough to show the shadow of a rocking chair. Moving. Back and forth. Back and forth. May took another breath and pushed the door. The chair stopped. Empty. She exhaled too soon, because that's when she saw the walls. Scratched into the wood all around the room were names, hundreds of them. Some in English, some in symbols. Some were full names, others just initials. All etched deeply, as if clawed in desperation, and just above the frame of the bed. "She who stays." Carved deeper than the rest. May stumbled back, heart pounding. As she turned to leave, her flashlight flickered, and for half a second, the reflection in the dusty mirror showed 2 people. Only one was her. The other had no face. She fled the cabin without locking it. Back into the storm. Back into the whispering wind that seemed to follow her with every step. That night, she didn't go home. She parked on the edge of the old Ranger Trail and slept in her truck. Because deep in her bones, May knew Ridgeway was awake again, and something in it remembered her name. May Holloway didn't dream that night in the truck. She listened. To the slow tick of cooling metal, to the hiss of distant rain tapering into mist, and, most of all, to the forest. Ridgeway spoke when it thought no one was listening, and tonight, it whispered like it knew she was still awake. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the truck's cabin grew cold. Not the kind of cold that slips in through cracked windows, but the sudden, untraceable kind that feels like a hand brushing your skin. The windshield fogged in reverse like something had exhaled against it from the outside. May sat up straight, eyes wide, hand on her flashlight. There was a smudge on the glass. From the inside, a handprint. Too small to be an adult's, too low to be hers. She hadn't moved all night. May flicked the flashlight on and scanned the cab, then outside. Nothing. The forest had gone still. No crickets, no owls, no wind. Only the slow creak of trees bowing in a rhythm that didn't match the weather. She started the engine. The radio flared. At first it was static. Then it warped into something else. Layered voices speaking over each other, slowed and stretched like old cassette tape. Somewhere in the static, May heard her name again. Not screamed, not whispered. Sung. A child's voice. Off-key. Like a lullaby from somewhere very far away. May E. May E. Come down slow. She turned the radio off. It didn't stop. The singing continued faintly, as if echoing in the trees. And beneath it, something heavier. A bass hum like breath beneath soil. May pulled out of the trail and headed back toward the main station, but her lights barely pierced the fog. Every beam bounced back, distorted. The signs she passed looked wrong. Some were aged decades beyond what they should have been. Others bore names she didn't recognize. Welcome to Coldwater Trailhead. One read. There was no such trail in Ridgeway. She stopped, got out, walked up to the sign. The wood was wet, cracked, nailed into the ground with rusted iron. Beneath it, in smaller lettering, Esther 1871, closed after the fire. May touched the surface. It was real, solid. Then the wind picked up again and she turned. Someone stood in the tree line, barely visible. A woman, or what might have been one. Too tall, her limbs too long. Her dress flickered like shadow in water, never settling into full focus. May couldn't see her face, only that it didn't match the rest of the body. The outline was wrong. She didn't move. May blinked. The figure was gone, but her footprints remained in the dirt. Bare feet, deep, leading not toward the trail but away from it, into the thickest part of the woods where no trails existed. May followed. Every step felt like stepping out of time. The temperature dropped further. The forest became quiet in a way that hurt the ears. Not peaceful, but pressurized, as if something was listening too closely. Then she found it. The clearing. Circular. Perfectly round. Trees curved outward as if repelled from its center. At its heart stood a stone, large, jagged, and covered in moss. But May could see what was carved beneath the green. Symbols. The same ones from Cabin 7, the same ones from the maps in the station basement. She stepped forward. A low sound vibrated through her feet, not audible but physical, like a distant drum buried beneath layers of soil. Then she saw the offering. A doll. Old. Fabric torn, eyes replaced with tiny river stones, and tucked into the doll's dress, a park brochure, one from the 1980s, still dry, untouched by the elements. On the back, a child's handwriting in red crayon. She lets you in, but not back out. May turned to run, but she was no longer alone in the clearing. Something stood just beyond the tree line. Many somethings, unmoving, silent, watching. May didn't scream. She didn't run. She walked backwards, keeping her flashlight steady, the beam shaking in her trembling hands. She didn't blink until she was back on the main trail. The air changed, the cold lifted, and when she turned, the clearing was gone. Trees had filled the space. No footprints, no stone, no doll, just forest. Silent again. But something had followed her. Not footsteps, not breath, but the feeling you get in your spine when you realize the night has teeth. May got back in her truck and drove. Not home. Not to the station. She went to the old fire watch tower, abandoned since '74, because the woman from the woods, she was in the mirrors now, and May had run out of light. The woods had gone silent again, not with peace but with anticipation. May felt it in her chest first, that slow compression, like the trees were leaning in closer, not physically, but spiritually. She had dreamt of voices whispering her name the night before, layered over each other like brittle leaves scraping in the wind. But the dreams always ended at the same place now, the black stump near Dead Elk Hollow. She had never seen it before in real life, but she knew where to find it. Morning broke with a gray hue, and May left her house before the sun had fully risen. She didn't tell her mother. She didn't leave a note. She didn't take her camera. Just a small flashlight, the leather notebook, and the name of the stump carved deep in her brain. Dead Elk Hollow wasn't far. Maybe a 30-minute walk through the old part of Ridgeway, past the rusted-out bridge and the grave of the dog named Copper. But as she approached the clearing where the stump should have been, the world grew quieter, unnaturally so. Her boots crunched leaves that hadn't fallen yet. Even the birds stopped watching. And there it was. The stump. Blackened and jagged, wider than a dinner table. Not burnt, not rotted, just wrong. Like it had been severed from the earth by something that did not understand or care for nature. Its bark pulsed gently, almost like breath. May stepped closer, and she saw the scratches. Not carvings, not initials. Scratches, long and deep, made by fingers that bled or claws that had stories. But one set stood out. Deep grooves running straight down the side like something had tried to claw its way out into the stump. That's when she heard it. A breath. Not her own. Not the wind. A raspy, wheezing exhale behind her left ear. May spun, but nothing was there. Yet the trees all leaned slightly in her direction, like they'd caught her flinch and were now waiting for her next mistake. She stumbled back from the stump and tripped over something soft. A coat. A child's coat. Blue, torn at the sleeve, smeared with dry red mud. She recognized the patch on the front, a cartoon astronaut waving at a moon. It belonged to Benji McClure, the boy who disappeared in 1989, the one her uncle never spoke about, the one who vanished while walking home through the woods. Her breath caught in her throat, a soft whisper close to her ear. Not yours to dig up. May stood and ran, Branches caught her hair. Roots tried to trip her. But she didn't stop until she hit pavement again, chest heaving, the coat still clutched in her hand. She didn't know how it got there, but the trees did, and so did the stump. That night she left the coat on her porch, hoping it would disappear. It didn't. In the morning, it was inside the house, folded neatly on her bed. The air in May's room changed the moment she saw the coat. It was folded too perfectly, smoothed like a mother might do for a child going off to school, with the sleeves tucked gently in and the collar lifted just slightly. But the dried mud hadn't vanished, and the small rip at the seam of the shoulder still held a single strand of blonde thread, Benji McClure's thread. May didn't scream. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because something deeper than fear had settled in her bones. A sense of being watched, not just observed, remembered. She backed away slowly, the floor groaning beneath her steps as if warning her. The morning sun outside her window did not spill warmth into the room. Instead, it cast long, too thin shadows across the walls. One shadow, one that didn't move when she did, stretched up to the ceiling and twitched. She left the coat, ran out the door, didn't look back. By the time she reached the edge of Ridgeway Park, her lungs burned and her mind was racing. She needed to talk to someone. Not her mother, not the sheriff. Someone who believed. And that meant Mr. Greeley. He lived in a trailer just beyond the junkyard, surrounded by rusted washing machines and overturned canoes. Most people thought he was a drunk. Maybe he was. But May knew better. She remembered how he'd warned the neighborhood kids to never play in the hollow. How he carried strange charms on his belt and once lit salt on fire when the Miller twins got lost in the creek. He opened the door before she knocked. "They gave it back to you, didn't they?" he said. Not as a question, but as a knowing. May nodded. He ushered her inside. The trailer smelled of burnt sage and engine oil. Cracked photographs lined the shelves, pictures of people who looked afraid. And in the center of the room, on a table made of an old car hood, sat a thick book bound in faded leather. "The Hollow's awake again," he said, flipping through pages filled with charcoal sketches of strange trees and eyeless faces. "And you woke it, girl. Or maybe it chose you this time. Either way, it's not done yet." May explained everything. The stump, the coat, the whisper, the dreams. Greeley listened with narrowed eyes and calloused hands, gripping the book tighter. "You're not the first, May. Ridgeway's seen things before. And there's something about that stump. It don't grow, don't rot. It's the mouth, you see. It breathes what we bury." May shivered. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he handed her a photograph, yellowed, curled at the edges. In it, 5 children stood beneath the twisted oak at the hollow's edge, their faces pale and grim. One boy, standing slightly apart from the others, wore a coat nearly identical to the one May found on her bed. "Benji," Greeley whispered. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. May traced the faces in the photo with her eyes, her finger hovering over each like a slow pendulum. "Who are the others?" "Missing," Greeley said. "Some presumed runaways. One turned up years later, couldn't speak, just rocked back and forth until he died in '89. The rest never came home. They all saw something at the stump, just like you." May clenched her fists, her heart racing. The edges of the photograph were brittle and crumbling in her hand. "Why is it back? Why me?" Greeley rubbed a hand over his unshaven jaw. "That stump's older than this town. They built Ridgeway around it, fenced it off and called it a park to keep folks from asking questions. Every few decades it calls someone. It called Benji. Now it's calling you." The wind rattled the trailer walls and the overhead lamp flickered. "There's more," May said softly. "The dreams. They're getting worse." Greeley nodded. "That's how it begins. And soon, you'll start seeing things even when you're awake." A silence fell between them, heavy as smoke. He reached beneath the table and pulled out a mason jar filled with black salt and old teeth. You'll need protection and answers. Both lie in the hollow, but you can't go alone. Not yet. May hesitated. Who else? Greeley didn't answer. He rose and walked to the back of the trailer, returning with an oil lantern and a battered Walkman cassette player. You ever heard of Grace Delaney? May shook her head. She was the last one the hollow tried to take. Back in '72, she lived, barely. But she saw deeper than most. Her voice is on this tape. Maybe it'll guide you. May took the player with shaking hands. The tape inside had been labeled in red ink. The Breathing Tree. Back home, May locked her door and sat cross-legged on her bed. She clicked the cassette into place, held her breath, and pressed play. A hiss. Then a voice. If you're hearing this, it means the hollow knows your name. Don't go near the tree at dusk. Don't follow the whispers. And whatever you do, never answer it. May froze. The voice continued, slower now, more strained, as if it was speaking through water. I saw it blink. It doesn't have eyes, but it blinked. And the roots, they move. They're not roots, they're fingers. It's looking for someone. It's always been looking. May's fingers trembled on the pause button. Her breath caught in her throat as the voice faded into static. But just before the tape ended, there was one final line, barely a whisper. If it left the coat, it already touched you. May yanked out the headphones. The silence in her room now felt wrong, too still. No birdsong outside, no wind, just waiting. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she stared at the hallway outside her door, where shadows stretched too far, and listened for a whisper she prayed would never come again. The morning light did not bring peace. May stood at her window, eyes bloodshot, watching the mist crawl low over Ridgeway's cracked streets. She hadn't slept. She couldn't. The voice from the tape still echoed in her mind. It already touched you. She could feel something in her skin now, a crawling, like roots threading under flesh. A knock at the door made her jump. She grabbed the jar of black salt and teeth Greeley had given her, clutching it like a weapon. Another knock, softer but wrong, like someone imitating human rhythm. She cracked the door open. No one. Only a thick envelope sitting on the porch, tied in string and sealed with wax. A sigil carved into the seal like a knot of thorns. May hesitated, then unwrapped it. Inside were pages from a journal. Yellowed, brittle. The ink smeared in places like someone had written them while shaking. A photo fell out, grainy and time-worn, of a woman in a hospital gown staring out a rain-specked window. Written on the back, Grace Delaney, 1974. May spread the pages on the floor. Entry 42. They only come for the quiet ones, that's the rule. They find silence and fill it with secrets. The tree breathes in your name and breathes out your reflection. That's how it begins. A coat on your bed, a voice in your ear. Then the changes start. Entry 43. I saw my own smile in the mirror, but I wasn't smiling. It was practicing. May backed away, heart hammering. She looked toward the mirror on her closet. She had draped a blanket over it days ago, since the first dream, but now the blanket was on the floor, and the mirror was fogged over, from the inside. She approached slowly. Each step felt like walking through syrup. When she was a foot away, the fog inside cleared just enough. Something moved behind her reflection. A hand, long, root-like, brushed her shoulder in the mirror, but not in the room. May screamed and spun around. Nothing, just her room, just the ticking clock, just the silence. Her knees buckled and she collapsed to the floor, gasping. And then, the Walkman, still on her nightstand, crackled back to life. No one had touched it. The same voice returned, Grace Delaney's. But it wasn't the same message. This was a new one. You have until the last leaf falls, the voice said. Then it walks. Then it wears your face and no one will know the difference. May stared out her window at the twisted oak on the ridge. Its leaves were turning red. The next morning came gray and dull, as if the sun itself didn't dare shine too bright over Ridgeway. May hadn't slept, not really. Just closed her eyes and drifted in shallow loops of nightmare and wakefulness. The cassette player sat silent on her desk, as if the tape inside had never spoken. She knew better. Her phone buzzed with a text from Greeley. "Meet me, noon, church basement. Come alone." She stared at it for a long moment before grabbing her coat, the one that still smelled faintly of smoke and pine, and stepped outside. The streets of Ridgeway were unusually empty. Not quiet. There were sounds, but not the kind she expected. No chatter, no laughter. Just the creak of trees in the wind and the distant click, click, click of something pacing across pavement. But whenever she turned to look, nothing was there. The church basement was colder than outside, the lights dim and flickering. Greeley stood by a folding table spreading out old maps and yellowed papers. At his side sat a woman May hadn't seen before, mid-60s with stark white hair pulled tight and a scar like a tree branch across her jaw. "This is Grace Delaney," Greeley said. She agreed to help. May blinked. "From the tape?" Grace's eyes narrowed. "You listened to it?" May nodded. Grace looked away. "Then you don't have much time." She leaned forward, tapping the map with a crooked finger. "There's a place deeper than the hollow. Locals call it the below route. It's not marked, but it's where the dreams lead. Where it truly lives." May's voice came out thin. "The tree?" "The tree is just the mouth," Grace said. "The below root is the throat, and it's hungry." She pulled a bundle of cloth from her bag and unwrapped it. Inside was a tiny bird-like skeleton strung on red thread, its bones etched with strange symbols. "For protection," she said. "Wear it near your heart. It won't stop it, but it might slow it down." May took it with trembling hands. "What does it want?" Grace didn't answer right away. Then softly, "It wants to be remembered." A sound echoed from the stairwell, 3 knocks, slow and deliberate. Greeley's face went pale. "No one knew we were meeting here." The lights flickered again. Then they heard it. A dragging sound. From beneath the floor, something moving through the soil. May took a step back. "Is it here?" Grace closed her eyes. "It's always here." The 3 of them stared at the door as the dragging sound came closer, louder, now wet, like roots tearing through meat. May clutched the bone charm to her chest, heart pounding. Then, silence. Greeley moved first, crossing to the door with hesitant steps and opening it just a crack. Nothing. Only the empty stairwell and a faint smell of dirt. He closed the door slowly. "We don't have long. If we're going to the below route, we go tonight." May looked at Grace. "Will I come back?" Grace met her eyes. "Not all of you." Then she handed May an old key, rusted and warm to the touch. "This opens something buried behind the hollow stump, a cellar door. It was sealed for a reason. Break it only if you're ready." May didn't answer, but she took the key. That night, Ridgeway felt thinner, like the edges of reality were peeling back. Fog spilled over the streets, thick and pale, curling around the lampposts like fingers. May walked alone toward the hollow, the rusted key heavy in her coat pocket, the bird-bone charm cold against her chest. She passed the house on Weller Street, the one that always smelled like burnt sugar. It was dark now, shutters drawn. A crow perched on the mailbox let out a low, guttural sound, almost human. May didn't stop. The hollow was waiting. When she reached the stump, it looked different. It pulsed slightly, like something breathing just beneath the bark. The clearing was quiet, too quiet. No wind, no insects, not even the whisper of trees. She crouched behind the stump, brushing away wet leaves and black moss until her fingers found it. A cellar door, bolted shut with thick iron bands. She slid the key into the rusted lock. It resisted, then gave with a shriek loud enough to rattle her skull. The hatch opened with a groan. Inside was only darkness. She lowered herself slowly, the wood steps groaning beneath her weight. The scent hit her first. Earth, rot, something older. Something that had been sealed a long time. She turned on her flashlight. Roots lined the walls like veins. Strange markings had been burned into the dirt. Her beam landed on something up ahead, a door, wooden, ornate, carved with symbols that seemed to squirm when she looked too long. May's breath caught. Someone had written on the door in chalk, "Remember it or become it." She reached for the handle, then paused. A voice whispered behind her, "May." She spun around, heart hammering. Nothing, but she felt it now. Something breathing, not from ahead, but from within. Her. She opened the door. What lay beyond wasn't a room. It was a tunnel. Narrow, twisting, made of pulsing roots and wet stone. Shapes moved within the walls, faces pressed in the bark. Some were familiar, some were hers. She stepped forward, flashlight flickering. The tunnel grew warmer. The root walls pulsed, and every pulse matched her heartbeat. The path narrowed until she had to crawl. Then the whisper came again, clearer. "You shouldn't have come alone." She tried to turn. The tunnel had sealed behind her. Only forward now. May's hand brushed something slick, then something grasped her wrist. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed. A face emerged from the wall. Her mother. But wrong. Eyes hollow, mouth too wide. "Let me remember you," it rasped. May yanked free and crawled faster. The tunnel opened suddenly, dropping her into a circular chamber lit by a red living glow. In the center stood the tree. Not the stump, not a dream. The breathing tree. Its bark moved with breath. Its limbs swayed without wind. Its roots curled toward her like fingers, and from the branches hung dozens of cassette tapes. They swayed gently, whispering. May stood frozen, trembling. One tape detached itself, falling into her hands. It read, "May Thatcher, Side A." The tree spoke, not in sound, but inside her skull. "Play it." She stared down at the cassette, then reached for her player. The tunnel sealed behind her. Again. May clicked the tape into her old player. A soft hiss. Then, a child's laughter. Her laughter. Then her mother's voice, gentle, tired, humming a lullaby. The sound of wind chimes, a door creaking, a fire crackling in winter, each sound stabbed like memory. But it was more than memory. It was exact, precise, alive. She could smell the cedar in her childhood room, feel the rough knit of her grandmother's quilt. Then, static, followed by a man's voice she didn't recognize. "We told you not to come alone." May ripped off the headphones. The room was changing. The walls of the chamber rippled like water. The root floor cracked open in spirals. From the splits, hands emerged, pale, bark-skinned, clutching more cassettes. They offered them to her. Dozens, hundreds, each labeled with a name she knew. Elliot, Hark, Mother, Grandfather, Sheriff Dale, each with a label. Side A, Side B, lost, erased. May backed away. "No, I didn't come for this." But the tree was louder now, not speaking. Showing. Flashes filled her skull. Her mother locking the basement, Hark drawing a circle on her arm in chalk. Sheriff Dale burying something at the foot of the hollow. The ritual. The 5 children. A 6th name, erased. From all records. May screamed, clutched her head. She wasn't supposed to remember. And yet, the tree whispered in her blood, "You were the 6th." May collapsed. Around her, the tree's roots moved, curling protectively. The cassettes hanging from its limbs began to spin like a mobile above a crib. Each one played a piece of Ridgeway's buried past. All the sins, all the secrets, All the voices of the disappeared, and through it all, one steady rhythm pulsed beneath her. A heartbeat. Her own, but not just hers. The tree was alive with it, feeding, remembering it under Ridgeway, and now May was inside it, becoming part of it. The tapes didn't just tell stories, they recorded lives. And the recorder had just clicked into record. May opened her eyes slowly. She was no longer in the root chamber. The tree had unspooled her, or maybe she had unspooled herself. She stood in a dim hallway that pulsed like something organic. Veins of light ran along the walls like capillaries. Everything breathed, inhaled, exhaled. The floor beneath her bare feet was soft, damp, moss-like. Ahead, a door. But it wasn't just a door. It was her old bedroom door. The exact one from her childhood home, down to the chipped unicorn sticker on the top left corner. May approached it. Her hand trembled as she reached for the knob. Behind this door was everything the tree wanted her to see, everything it had preserved, everything it had fed on. She turned the knob. The door swung open with a gentle sigh. Inside, a room frozen in time, her bed with the pink canopy, the toy chest her grandfather built, her mother's scent on the pillows. But everything had a haze over it, as if underwater. In the center of the room stood a child, not just any child. May. Her 8-year-old self. Eyes wide, holding something behind her back. May approached slowly. The child. May whispered, "Do you remember what you buried?" May shook her head. "No, I don't." The little girl stepped aside. There was a hole in the wooden floorboards. Inside, wrapped in cloth, a cassette recorder, and beside it, a single tooth, etched with symbols. May dropped to her knees. Her younger self whispered, "You were never supposed to leave." The cassette clicked. Her mother's voice came through. "May, if you're hearing this, it means the others are already part of it. You must finish the circle, or it won't stop." May's pulse pounded. Finish the circle? Had the old woman known? Sheriff Dale? Even Hark? Suddenly the floorboards cracked wide. Tree roots reached up, fast, grabbing her arms, her legs, pulling her down. The child version of May did not move. She watched silently as the real May was swallowed by the memory. Darkness. Then, a heartbeat, but not just one. 5, then 6, then dozens. All around her. May realized the tree wasn't just feeding, it was waiting for her to remember, to finish the ritual, to become my final story. To press play. May awoke choking on air thick as syrup. She was no longer in the memory room, no longer on any floor at all. She floated, suspended inside a vast hollow space where the walls were bark, breathing slowly. Pulsing veins of golden sap coiled upward like nerves, lighting the darkness in slow rhythms. This was the heartwood, the true core of the tree. It wasn't made of wood or matter, it was made of remains. The voices came first, faint at first, then louder. Sheriff Dale, whispering scripture that bled into coughing. Ruth, the librarian, repeating, "We warned you. We all warned you." Hark's laughter, cracked and broken. "It gets in your blood, May. It is your blood." Their voices spiraled around her, forming a kind of chorus. A choir of those already taken. Then came the faces. Dozens, all the missing, each trapped within bulges along the walls like knots in a tree. Eyes open, mouths sewn with root thread. Alive, or something close to it. May turned to flee, but the sap floor rose beneath her feet, forming a narrow bridge toward a single object. A recorder, the same one from her childhood, now resting on a wooden pedestal shaped like a spinal column. Her mother's voice echoed again, "You must finish the circle." May stepped forward. Her legs didn't move. They were being moved, pulled gently by something inside her, or beneath her. She reached the recorder and pressed play. A silence. Then, her own voice as a child. I saw the tree. It asked for a story. I gave it Mommy's story. Then Daddy's. Then mine. May's adult voice trembled. I didn't remember. The child on the tape whispered, but you always knew. Suddenly the heartwood trembled. Cracks split open around her, leaking glowing sap. From above, the old woman's face appeared, her smile now too wide, her eyes black pits dripping bark. She whispered, "Finish the story, May, or you'll stay unwritten." May screamed, and the tree answered, by the opening. A giant vertical slit in the wall tore open like an eye. Inside, a mirror. No reflection, only an empty silhouette. It waited for her to step in and become part of the story. Forever. May did not step forward. She couldn't. Not yet. Her breath was ragged. Her hands trembled as the bark mirror in front of her shimmered with that hollow silhouette, waiting, hungry to be filled. But something inside her was shifting. She remembered the recorder's voice, her own, the stories she had once told this tree as a child, without knowing what it truly was. And she realized something. Each story she gave it, her mother's, her father's, her own, had fed the tree. It thrived on memory, on narrative. It wasn't just alive. It was a parasite of meaning. "Is that what you are?" May asked aloud, voice quivering. "A god of stories, or just a graveyard that sings?" No answer. But the golden sap began to drip faster from the cracks in the wall. The mirror pulsed. The silhouette inside moved, a twitch of the hand like it was beckoning. May turned slowly. The faces in the bark, Sheriff Dale, Ruth, Hark, the children. They followed her, not with fear, with warning. She clutched the recorder tighter and did the one thing the tree had never expected. She began to speak, not into the recorder, into the hollow. "I was 7 when I first saw you," May said, her voice rising. "You were a myth, a place in the park where kids dared each other to go, a dead trunk that felt alive." The ground trembled. "I told you a story then, one I didn't understand, and you took it. You used it. You grew fatter, hungrier. You made this town a book and every person in it a page." The silhouette in the mirror twitched again, violently this time. May kept going. "Well now, here's the ending." She took the recorder. She pressed record and said, "This is the last story the tree will ever eat, because it's about you and how you die." Suddenly, the sap erupted into flame. The tree screamed, not with a voice but a sucking implosion of memory, pulling in everything, the faces, the bridge, the golden veins. May ran, up the twisting bark spine that had once been the pedestal. The mirror cracked, shattered, revealing not a void this time, but the husky yes and a way out. May leapt, and the tree finally collapsed. The heartwood dissolved into ash and wind, and May fell into a mourning. May awoke in the grass. Real, soft, living grass, no faces, no whispering bark, no golden veins, just the scent of dew, the cool hum of dawn, and birds, actual bird song, not warped or backward, just birds chirping above her like they had always been there. She sat up slowly. Her coat was scorched. Her recorder, somehow, still clutched in her hand. She looked around. She was in Linden Hollow Park. The real one. The trees were thinner here, less ancient, no shadowed crown of bark. Just the playground nearby, rusted swings swaying in the wind. For a moment, May wept, not for sorrow, for relief. But then, as she stood, she saw something in the distance, at the edge of the trees. A small sign, wooden, new. She walked over, heart pounding. The sign read, New Growth Initiative, property of Linden County Forestry Dept. And beneath it, in small, black paint, Site 7B, the breathing tree. May's blood ran cold. A child's laughter echoed faintly in the distance. She turned toward the sound and saw a group of children walking with a teacher near the edge of the woods, approaching this very grove. May screamed, "Don't!" But they couldn't hear her. They walked straight past her like she wasn't even there, and one child turned, paused, staring at May. He smiled. His eyes were hollow. Sap ran down his cheek, and then he vanished into the woods. The tree was undead, but the story was not. May didn't go home, she couldn't. Not with that smile still burned into her vision. Not with the sap still slick on her hand even though she'd scrubbed it raw in the park's restroom sink. Instead, she returned to the sheriff's office. What was left of it? The front door hung open. No lights, no power. Inside, files lay strewn across the floor like wind-scattered leaves. The corkboard that once held the missing person posters now hung empty, only faded outlines and pushpin scars remaining. May's boots crunched on broken glass as she moved through the wreckage. Something pulled her deeper in, back toward the evidence room. It was still locked, but May no longer needed a key. She pressed her palm against the metal. It was warm, breathing. The lock clicked, open. Inside, the box was still there, the one labeled Exhibit C, Found Tape, 1997. She lifted it with shaking hands. Inside, the original recorder, still marked with her initials, and a small branch, blackened, twisted, still pulsing, still alive. May dropped it, stumbling back, but it didn't hit the ground. It burrowed. The roots crawled along the tile like veins, searching, smelling. And then, the concrete floor cracked. A slow, groaning sound filled the room. Something far beneath. The station was moving, waking. The ground trembled, and May knew she had never truly escaped. She had only been released. To spread the roots elsewhere, to finish the tale. Finish the circle, the voice whispered again, this time from inside her. And May realized something horrifying. She wasn't the last chapter. She was the seed. The earth split open beneath the sheriff's station, but there was no quake reported, no news, no sirens, because no one remembered the town anymore. May stood in the collapsing ruins, staring down into the hole. It wasn't just dirt below, it was memory, rooms, voices, faces, the layers of everything buried and forgotten. The town's foundation hadn't been built on stone, it had been built on stories, and those stories had teeth. May felt them now, biting from within. Her veins itched with gold, her skin hummed with bark, her thoughts, not all her own anymore. She stumbled outside, clutching the recorder. The sky was dark, though no clouds hung above. The stars were wrong, twisted into patterns she couldn't name. At the edge of the woods, the tree waited. But now it was no longer a tree. It was a doorway. And something stood within it. Not a person, not even a shape, just a space. Exactly the size and shape of her. Waiting. May's tears came hot and fast. She didn't want to finish the story, but she already had, long ago, when she first whispered into the bark, when she first said, "You can have mine." The tree opened wider, and May walked in. The woods closed behind her. By morning, the station was gone, replaced by a field of tall grass. No ruins, no sign it had ever been there at all. And in the center of the field, a new sapling stood, small, quiet, waiting. Its bark was warm. If you pressed your ear to it, you might hear her voice, still telling stories, still trying to remember who she was. But no one ever listens long, because the ones who do, don't come back. They stay, and they grow, just like her. Ridgeway Park, the Whisperings, an unsolved horror mystery. A park where no map is ever complete, a carousel that sings when no one's near, and a story that was never meant to end. You followed the trail. You heard the roots. You saw the tree breathe. Now, you've been seen too. Subscribe before the memories rot. Turn on the lantern. Notifications. Next file opens soon.